What's going on, guys? Dare here with Fantasy Football Advice, coming at you with another fantasy football video. Today, we're going over everything that you need to know for week 6 of the NFL season. We're going to go through the injuries, some news and notes. Just keep in mind, I am recording this video a little bit earlier than you're watching it. So, if it's Sunday morning, make sure to check the most up-to-date information. You can find that on RotoWorld. If any of you are having trouble with your starter sits or setting your lineup, feel free to utilize the rankings available on our site, thefantasyfootballadvice.com. The link that's in the description box below. And when using the rankings, all you have to do is compare the two players, and whichever player is ranked ahead of the other, that's the guy that we would recommend you start. We're jumping right into it though, and we are going to start with updates on the running back position. Biggest news, of course, is David Johnson. He's a game time decision. If active, you got to put him in, even if he's limited. The matchup doesn't get much better. Falcons, they're 28th in rush DVOA. They also give up a ton of receptions to the running back position. The Cardinals shouldn't need DJ to play though. Chase Edmonds has done enough to prove himself. He's averaging over 6 yards per carry. He's competent catching out of the backfield, and you definitely don't want to risk losing DJ for even more time. But if Edmonds is the starter and DJ misses, you're talking massive upside for a player you got virtually for free. Last week he had his season high 4 targets, and that was on 35% of snaps. If deemed the starter, he will easily double that, somewhere in the 70% range. And against a team like the Falcons who gives up a ton of receptions to the running back position, that's double-digit target upside, which is a massive floor. And I already went over his efficiency numbers. It's likely that if he's given the opportunity, he should perform. Maybe not to DJ's level, but definitely RB2 at the least with RB1 upside. Look forward to seeing a little bit more of Rashad Penny this week. Thursday against the Rams, that was his first game back from injury. He only played on 16% of snaps. Chris Carson, he's been fumbling the ball a lot, so I'm sure Seattle definitely wants to give him an opportunity to perform. Melvin Gordon is expected to get an increased workload this upcoming week. They face the Steelers in a matchup where they are expected to win by a significant amount. Out of the two, Eckler and Gordon, I would suspect that Gordon would be the guy to run out the clock. And reason being is because why not wear out the tread on his tires? They definitely don't intend on keeping him, or they would be fools to, because I mean, look what Austin Eckler's been able to do in his place. And Melvin Gordon, the type of money he wants, he really doesn't deserve. And we saw last week, Eckler, 16 targets, Gordon, 6. And while Gordon is going to be getting more snaps this week, it's not like they were miles apart last week. There was 66% of snaps for Austin Eckler, 46% of snaps for Melvin Gordon. So, I mean, if that goes closer to 50-50 or even flips in reverse, if Eckler's getting the majority of the targets and the receptions, he's still the back to own. Todd Gurley is listed as doubtful. I can tell you pretty confidently he's not going to play. He played on 93% of the snaps last week. Clearly that divisional matchup was one that they wanted to win, but unfortunately, it resulted in an injured Todd Gurley. It was only a matter of time though, but with him being out, Malcolm Brown is going to step into a big workload, which will virtually guarantee him RB2 type production. The upside is really going to be determined on if he scores or not. We've seen him score already 2 times in a single game. And with the Rams being favorites and this game also having the 3rd highest projected point total on the week, I'd say he has a pretty decent chance of scoring this week. So if you did manage to grab him off of waivers, you definitely want to put him in the lineup. Darrell Henderson, he should get an increased opportunity share. His work mostly on 3rd down. He's going to be the designated pass catcher, but this offense has moved a little bit away from targeting the running back position. So there's no way to guarantee what type of volume he's going to receive. So it's in no way a safe start, but it's definitely somebody who, if you're in a pinch, you can put in there. So just keep an eye out for Henderson. If you're a Kamara owner, make sure you're checking the injury report. He was added late on Thursday, and this would be one of the best matchups he has had this season, which, if we're being honest, has been a tad underwhelming. Not because of the volume is there, but the touchdowns. Alvin Kamara, he's known to score at a higher rate than almost anyone in the entire NFL. And so far this season, he's only scored in 1 game through 5 weeks. So he's been relying strictly on receptions and yardage alone, which just doesn't have the same type of ceiling. This week though, Jacksonville, they rank dead last in defensive rush DVOA. So a chance to score, even as a road underdog, was extremely likely and still is if he does suit up. But if he doesn't, Latavius Murray instantly becomes an upside RB2 just based on the volume. They don't really have too many players competing for touches behind him. And if they do get near the red zone or the green zone, you can guarantee Latavius Murray is going to be in on that. Clearly Kamara is going to have the higher upside of the two, but in a game that's projected to be very close through and through, being a road underdog should not impact the potential for a top 5 performance this week from Kamara. In some minor news, Kalen Ballage, he's questionable to play. How that will impact Kenyon Drake, I think people are overreacting just a little bit. Week 4 before their bye week last week, Ballage only played on 8 snaps, which was 15%. And Kenyon Drake did not see a big boost in his snap percentage. In fact, it had been in the same exact range. The player who actually did get an increase was Mark Walton. So it's safer to assume that they're going to keep Drake in that 40 to 60% range. Meanwhile, some of these other backs are going to get more opportunities as a relief. Now, if there was going to be one matchup that Kenyon Drake may find success, it would be something like a matchup against the Redskins because it's somewhat competitive. Both teams are absolutely terrible, but if you're a Drake owner, and I own him in one league, what you should do is leave him on the bench, pray for a really good game, and trade him for whatever you could possibly get. Because I'm telling you, if he does not perform well in this game, I'm going to be dropping him to free agency because it's just a wasted roster spot at this point with absolutely no upside unless he gets traded. I think that's it for running backs, so let's move over to some wide receiver news. Christian Kirk is a game time decision, which isn't some massive news. He's already been out a couple weeks now, so it's not like that's going to impact anyone's fantasy value. He's likely going to be on a limited workload if he does end up being activated. This is a plus matchup, though I still wouldn't trust him. I would prefer to trust in Larry Fitzgerald, but I can't forget the biggest news at the wide receiver position is Tyreek Hill may finally have his return from injury. He's a game time decision, but the offense, they could definitely use him. You have Patrick Mahomes, who's banged up, Sammy Watkins, who's already been ruled out. So even Tyreek Hill on a limited basis could really do this team justice. A lot of injuries this week. Don't forget Marquise Brown, also a game time decision. It wasn't the greatest matchup for him anyway. Bengals are much worse against the run than they are against the pass, but this is not going to help Lamar Jackson. One less weapon for him, and it's a matchup that favors the running back position a lot more than it favors his passing production. And while he can obviously get it done on the ground himself, but since they're such heavy favorites, he may not even be required to do all that much. I think that's about it for injury news. Let's talk about some trends that we're seeing. And to start, I think we should mention targets, so mostly wide receivers, and very important I touch on Adam Thielen. I mentioned him in yesterday's video, so I'll just gloss over it. The closed mouth does not get fed. Typically, when receivers speak up and it becomes a big ordeal, production does come to fruition, and it happened for Thielen, so you have to wonder, is it going to continue or not? And while no, he was extremely efficient, 2 touchdowns on 7 receptions, that's unsustainable long term, especially in this type of offense that's run heavy. But I do think the 8 targets that were his season high are going to be more of what you could expect as opposed to what he was receiving earlier in the season. DJ Chark, another player I mentioned in yesterday's video, his targets have steadily increased week over week, and that falls right in line with the production and trust that he's likely gaining from Minshew. So it's a positive sign. Before, when a player just completely goes off and they only have 4 targets in back-to-back weeks, it's difficult to trust that player in your lineup, but 8 targets, 11 targets, that's a completely different story, and those are exactly the amount that DJ Chark has had in week 4 and week 5. We also have Mike Williams, who received a whopping 13 targets, which for him is extremely unexpected. Typically, he's more of a low volume guy, expected to be the red zone weapon like he was last season, especially with Hunter Henry missing time, but he was able to double Keenan Allen's targets, and it's not as if Allen wasn't on the field. Allen was for 99% of plays, but before we get too far ahead of ourselves, he was being shadowed by Chris Harris. Clearly he got in Keenan Allen's head because he's been making statements after the game. And would we expect Mike Williams to continue to receive that type of target share? It's not like he even did too much with it. He only caught 6 of 13 targets. And this upcoming matchup, it is going to lean more in the favor of Allen. Slot receivers do have success against the Pittsburgh Steelers defense, and Allen, he is a premier slot receiver. The only other wideout who had an outlier-ish target share was going to be Will Fuller, who we all know had that monster performance, 16 targets. Compare that to his previous season high, which was 7, and there's not really any need to go too much into it. We're not going to see that type of market share happen again. Because of the success, though, it is likely that he could see an increase in targets, but until he's able to put together consistent production week over week, he's still got to be classified as a high ceiling, low floor wide receiver 2. But believe me, he 100% was well overdue for a performance like that. Maybe not that high, but Fuller is no stranger to the end zone, and to remain scoreless through 5 weeks while being on the field nearly 100% of the time, something definitely had to give, so we can't be all that shocked. But let's move over to the running back snaps. With these running backs, the most important one that sticks out is going to be James Conner of the Pittsburgh Steelers, because he shot up from about 60% of snaps to a whopping 80%. And while that does happen to some running backs from time to time, his was due to an injury, so his role in that offense, that 80% snap share, is likely to continue as long as Jaylen Samuels is out. On top of that, more work in the passing game, so 100% James Conner is trending up. Unfortunately, he is on a very poor offense that has no quarterback that can help drive the ball down the field, so his ceiling is still going to be limited. But if you're an owner of him, even if he doesn't have the highest ceiling, he's still going to have 20% more opportunities to score fantasy points for your team. We already mentioned Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler and how those snaps could change, also Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. So the only other update that you should be mindful of as we head into week 6 is don't be surprised if the San Francisco 49ers backfield struggles a little bit more than they have before. They've always been a great running team. Gore, Hyde, Breida, Jeff Wilson, Coleman, literally any back you put in this offense looks great. And hey, nothing against those backs, but Kyle Juszczyk is kind of an unsung hero in this organization, and he's been around since 2009. It is now going to be out for 4 to 6 weeks. Last week against Cleveland, we did see the run game slow down as soon as he was out with the injury, but they were still able to break away some big plays. They're still talented backs. A lot of people don't know, but Kyle Juszczyk, heading into last week, was on the field more than players like Chris Thompson, David Montgomery, Derrick Henry, Kenyon Drake, Phillip Lindsay. So it's not really big news for most people. He's just a fullback. He's not going to be started in any fantasy lineups, but it may impact the players around him. So just be aware of that as we head into today's matchups. But guys, that's going to do it. If you did enjoy this video, please hit that like button. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscribe button. We thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you on the next one.